Welcome to the Happy Doc, the voice of fulfilled physicians. This show is about bringing inspirational, creative, successful, and happy health professionals to you. Get ready to learn how you can be a happy doctor too. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Happy Doc. For those of you who are not aware, this show is about physician and medical student fulfillment, and our goal is to make medical culture happier from the ground up. We do this by getting awesome examples, such as our next guest, Dr. Mark Shapiro. Dr. Mark Shapiro is a physician, a medical director, and hospitalist in Northern California. He's also a podcaster on the Explore the Space podcast. His podcast discusses topics such as gun violence, team culture, tech and medicine, fear, overcoming your limits, caring for NFL players, doping and sports, and much more. As you can tell, these topics are kind of all over the place, and that's because Dr. Mark Shapiro isn't afraid to talk about anything. He speaks to professionals, he speaks to interesting guests, and he relates some of these lessons he learns to medical culture. It's an amazing podcast, and I definitely want you guys to check out his show. His website is explorethespaceshow.com. In this episode, we learn a lot from Dr. Mark Shapiro. He discusses how he got started in podcast. He discusses the importance of culture and its impacts on medicine. We talk about his take on podcasting and how it has impacted him. We discuss medical culture and how long it takes to actually implement new information that we receive. He talks about a mistake that he made during his clinical practice and the importance of being vulnerable. We talk about the no dumping culture that he wants to implement and what that means in his practice. We finish with a talk about the physician-patient encounter and the importance of making authentic human connections with your patients. As always, please subscribe to our podcast using your podcast application on your phone or computer. Leave us a review on iTunes, and please share this episode. This is an episode you do not want to miss. I loved Dr. Mark Shapiro being on our podcast, and I know I learned so much. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Taylor Brana, and I'm really excited for our next guest. This is Dr. Mark Shapiro. He is a hospitalist, but also he has an amazing podcast. I'm a huge fan, by the way, it's called Explore the Space. And in every introduction, he says, there's a gulf between healthcare and our communities. This is the place to talk about it. We are digging into healthcare issues that matter most. Our conversations mine these issues for perspective and answers. I love that. Can you, first off, introduce yourself briefly and give us a taste of what that actually means?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Taylor. It's actually my wife that does the introduction. She has a voice. Awesome. Yeah, she has a voice that is built for the forward-facing side of the show, and she just did a great job doing our introduction. But yeah, so I've been hosting Explore the Space for almost 3 years now, and where it came from was I was doing work with a colleague of mine when I was living in San Diego, who had started a company that's built entirely around physician improvement and medical team improvement. It's called Practicing Excellence, and I was doing the hospitalist curriculum there, and said, "Boy, you really need a podcast." And I'd always loved the idea of podcasts and the whole concept of how we learn from the oral tradition, how we pass things down by connecting through language and connecting through stories. There is clearly a separation between people on our side of the equation in healthcare, physicians, nurse practitioners, healthcare administrators, nurses, etc., and people who are on the other side, those who are in need of care. And there is clearly a disconnect over any number of subjects. The gulf is wider, the space is wider on some issues, the space is a little closer together. But the idea being let's have a conversation about interesting subject matter, fun stuff that we can all grab something out of, do it in a conversational way. So when people are listening while they're working out or driving home, they feel like they want to engage, they want to contribute something, and do fun, esoteric, fun, eclectic topics that people might not necessarily associate with the didactic sort of lofty practice of medicine. So that's really where the show came from. That's the idea of the space. And so with the show, we've really been able to go in any direction we want. And I can invite people who do all kinds of different things to come on, and we dive in and we tease out all kinds of interesting things.
I love your concept. I really appreciate the show, by the way. I've been listening to some of the episodes, and what I was going to comment on is your style, because what is really interesting for me to listen to is you take these different topics, but then you apply it to the lens of medicine. So you're learning about, other areas, such as you just had like David Burke on. He was the fighter pilot, and the culture. I do want to talk about culture, by the way. That's an amazing topic. And then you apply that. How do we apply this to medicine? How do we take this culture? What is culture? What is this concept? And how do we apply that to medicine? I think it's a really powerful topic. And I think, you going from this very specific, maybe not even associated per se, and then adapting that to medicine is really amazing. So I appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to comment on and highlight was what you just said about the oral tradition. Podcasting to me is an amazing space because we can connect to so many people just by recording and having a singular conversation, but it spreads in so many ways. Do you feel like that's a power of podcasting for you?
That's the huge driver behind it. I mean, so I got my undergraduate degree in history from UCLA, and you learn when you're studying history the things that have brought people together, how we've been able to propagate stories, how we've been able to learn from each other, how we've been able to agree and disagree, how we're able to advance learning, and what happens when we don't. For me, the idea of podcasting, it's keeping that connective tissue growing. It's keeping us linked to the way we as societies, we as communities have been able to stay successful in the past in terms of how we learn from each other, how we can break down barriers, how we can engage with one another on subjects that we might not feel very comfortable with people that we may not even know. That's podcasting. I'm able to send an email or send out a ping on social media to someone that I've not met and say, this is my show and this is what we like to talk about. And I see this is the thing that you're working on. And you brought up David Burke. So Dave Burke is a fascinating guy. He's as accomplished a fighter pilot as you'll ever meet. He's flown every plane. He was a Top Gun instructor. He's flown the F-22. He's flown the F-35. But what do he and I have in common? Well, he writes this article that pops up in a business magazine about redefining perfection and how the military and especially fighter pilots at the highest level conceptualize the idea of being perfect. So if we switch that lens to medicine, we're obsessed with being perfect, right? We are competitive. We are obsessive. We are committed to doing everything we can to do the best job possible. But how do we continually try to get there? Well, in the Air Force and in the Marine Corps, when these pilots are having these conversations and they're doing high risk stuff, they're very open. They're very transparent. They're very accountable to one another. In medicine, we could work on that. We could get better at that. We could get better at having a culture where if you wanted to say to your teammates, you know what, I made a mistake and I'm going to be accountable for it and I'm going to get better. And I want to present it to you all so that you can learn from what I did because you're going to take care of patients with heart failure too. We're not great at that.
Yeah.
And the first time he came on the show, we talked about, when I was in medical school, the morbidity and mortality conferences, which were feared and dreaded and were awful. Yeah. And they were not good learning opportunities and they were missed opportunities because that's where you can get up in front of a group and say, you know what, I'm learning. I've got good people who are smart, who are in the room and they can give me some counsel. This was why I reached out to Dave Burke. And this is why Dave said, yes, please, let's do this. He's been on the show twice. He's going to come back on because we've realized that we come from very different perspectives. We have very different training. The goal is the same. The goal is to be as good as possible at what you're doing. What we can learn is how do we take it where when dealing with mistakes, with dealing with the sensitivity around recognizing I made a mistake, how do I use it? How do I leverage it to get better?
Yeah, and I think that's such an important topic
I think there's a lot of fear in medicine. Specifically, we talk a lot about, I feel like there's a lot of fear in terms of the legal system, making sure you're documenting very perfectly in order to, CYA, cover your ass, right? But within that, there's the other side of it is we're missing, like you said, these huge opportunities to be vulnerable, to say that, you know what, I made a mistake here. And that really does speak to, again, this bigger picture of culture. And I love this topic because it's so important. And I think, with these podcasts, for example, this is a way for us to transition or to enrich our medical culture. So doing this podcast, you've been able to interview many guests in various different areas. I oversaw or looked at your episodes. For example, you talked about gun violence and how that plays a role in medicine, nuclear war. You brought a guest on about that. What are some of the interesting or memorable parts of your journey in podcasting?
That's a really good question, because I've been doing it long enough now where I have the chance to reflect. And it's been fun to also look and see how many more doctors are getting into podcasting like yourself. The number is growing really, really quickly, which is wonderful. The thing that's been the most memorable has been not so much a moment of a show or feedback. It's been realizing I can reach out to anybody that I want. And I knew that going into it, but I've been struck by how excited people are to come on the show. They know I'm very transparent. I don't offer them anything. I can't pay them. I can't provide anything but a forum to have a conversation about the interesting things that they're doing and concepts, ideas, work that they are enthusiastic about. That's it. I don't have, there's no endorsements. There's no commercials. That's what the show is. And in doing that, when I first kind of paddled out, I was not really expecting much. I was expecting most people to say, you're small fry and what's in it for me? My time is valuable. Forget it. The vast majority of invitations that I send out via email, via social media, people reply really quickly with, yeah, this sounds really fun. I would really like to come on your show and engage with you. And that has been by far, the most exciting, the most inspiring part of this. People want to share their stories. They want to talk about and engage around the things that they feel strongly about, the things that define who they are in terms of some of their work or some of their accomplishments. They want to get that out there. And then knowing that the construct is, you're not coming on the show to talk for 50 minutes. You and I are going to have a conversation. We're going to dive in. If I disagree with you, I'm going to tell you I disagree. And I'll needle you a little bit and we'll dissect it out. And if you disagree with me, what I tell people when they call me or when they email me back and they say, all right, I want to know what questions you're going to ask me. I say, I don't script my show. I want to talk to you about this concept, this thing that you've done, this book that you've written. But this is going to be like good improv. This is going to go where it wants to go. The time is going to fly, I promise you. And we're not going to script it. If we script it, people can always tell. Yeah. We're going to let it flow. And I can assure you, you will enjoy it and I will enjoy it. And we're going to dive in. And the enthusiasm, the engagement around that, it's really exciting. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. No, that was wonderfully stated. And I think the authenticity of a conversation, those little pieces that unexpected, what's the next question going to be? What's the next comment going to be? I'm sure that's exciting for you. So with podcasting, one of the things that I really wanted to hear from you is there's this, for me, and I'm going to talk about myself for a second. I've noticed in my life, and we're talking about physician fulfillment, I've noticed in my life, I get really excited to do these episodes, and it's positively impacted the way I come into the clinic every day. Do you feel like, this has been an energetic boost or a way that makes you feel really good and also impacts your work?
I love that question. The answer is yes, absolutely. You have people come on and they tell you the things that they've done or the ideas that they have whether it's Sanjay Arora talking about Project Echo and how they're leveraging physicians all around the state of New Mexico to improve access, reduce wait times, and most of all, improve outcomes for patients with hepatitis C in the state of New Mexico. You can't finish a conversation like that and not have your mind going in 8 different directions and go back to a meeting and think, how could we leverage a technology like this? How can we engage our communities that are far flung? I'm the medical director for a hospitalist program in Northern California. Our catchment area is the upper third of the state. Wow. Now, California, as you go from the Bay Area up to the southern border of Oregon, it can get pretty rural. There's a lot of critical access facilities. There's a lot of smaller areas, smaller communities that don't have the access to UC San Francisco that we do. You finish those sorts of conversations and your mind is going 8 different directions. I have a conversation with Steve Beeson, who's a national authority on communication and organizational improvement, a good friend of mine and a mentor. You have those conversations, you are pulling ideas out 6 directions at a time about, okay, the next time I go into a patient room, I want to try this. The next time I sit down in front of my team, I want to do this. Yeah. It's so exciting. It's so fulfilling. And that's one of the reasons I keep doing it. It's a creative outlet, but I benefit as much as anybody, if not more.
I love that. I love that. And, that's definitely a theme I'm seeing is one of my previous guests, he said his biggest regret is worrying that when he dies, the music inside of him won't be played or he won't let the music come out. Right. So,
oh my gosh.
And actually I will ask you, we could go on to complete different direction, but I want to go back to, you were talking about you're listening to all these innovative people in their spaces and you're hearing something just like implementing something for hepatitis C, for example. Can we talk about the difficulties in implementing in medicine? I recently spoke to, we literally had grand rounds today and the doctor said it takes 17 years from a landmark study to actually implement the data that we're seeing. Can you talk about that in terms of the innovation and all these innovative things? I mean, you can apply it locally, but can you comment on that?
We're in an interesting crossroads about how we leverage information. So if you think about, I finished medical school in 2003. We were still on paper. We're still, getting our New England journals delivered to our mailbox, tearing out articles, stapling them, putting them in the cardiology file and the critical care file and the, nephrology file. We share information so differently now. Yeah. And getting back to Sanjay Arora, he's talking about the democratization of information. We are able to disseminate and distribute information so much more quickly. Part of it, though, too, is that when you hear something or learn something, you have total control over how quickly you as an individual adopt it. Mm-hmm. So if you read, let's think about the didactics of it. You read an article about the importance of using beta blockers for perioperative medicine in people with underlying coronary disease. You have a choice. You can start doing it right after you've read the paper, or you can wait. And everyone has a different approach. When you hear Dave Burke talk about the way you leverage cultural change is by sitting in front of your team and saying, this is the stuff that I am committed to do a better job of, and I'm going to be accountable to all of you, and let's get started right now. When he told me that, I had a division meeting the next day. Guess what I did? I said, I'm going to do that. And I said, all right, you all, we're growing as a division. We've got lots of different things that we're working on. I could do a better job of making our team-based metrics more forward-facing for everyone and making sure you guys are seeing exactly what I'm seeing. So I want to be accountable to you all for that. This is what I propose as my approach, and let's get started.
Wow.
That's how quick we can do it. There's nothing that's holding us back. Now, that's the individual side. Organizational change is a challenge. There are so many great resources. There's so many great ways to do this. There's so many smart people. And again, I emailed Scott Reeves, who, is a world's authority on organizational change. Scott, come on the podcast. I want your insights on how you teach organizations to implement change. It's one of the best 45 minutes you'll have. And he's so smart. He's so intelligent, and he has so much experience. You can start leveraging those things right away. 17 years to me is unacceptable.
Yeah.
I'm 41 years old. I'm not waiting 17 years for anything.
Yeah.
We're working hard. We're busy. We want to see results, not because of ego, not because I'm wanting to win an award, because if we can implement organizational change that impacts patient care, if we can impact physician satisfaction, if we can impact nursing retention, we should be doing that work as quickly as we can.
Yeah. No, that was really well stated. So something comes up to me is one of my guests described medicine as this like archaic hard rock that you just cannot overcome. It's like this mountain, and referring to the conservative nature of medicine. How do we battle that? Have you found any ways of overcoming that in your own experience?
I would actually push back on that a little bit. The conservative nature of medicine, I don't know if I'm going to accept that as being correct.
Okay.
Just tease that out for me. Give me a sense. Obviously, it wasn't you that said it, so you'll have to speak for the person you were having this conversation with. Just what's your sense of what were they getting at? What do they feel like is still conservative? Because if you look at medicine, we change and evolve fast. We adapt new technology fast. We take on new challenges fast. We see a problem. We see mortality is rising. We see C. diff rates are rising. We see we're not doing a good job of DVT prophylaxis. We engage with that stuff quickly. So are there things that we are conservative around? Sure. But I'm not sure that I could say that a global assessment of medicine, that the first adjective I would think of is conservative.
I love that. No, I love the pushback on that. I would say, I think the reference was in terms of looking at things like the entrepreneurial space, for example. Looking at these fields where the innovation is always being pushed. As technology is coming out, they're utilizing the tools as it comes out, and I think that. If we look at the hierarchical structure of medicine, sometimes, if you have attendings who don't implement these practices, people at the bottom of the chain or a little bit lower might not feel as comfortable. And I think we're breaking through that a lot. And I think that's, part of these discussions is, even on a personal level, oftentimes I'm growing and I feel somewhat more comfortable, but I don't always feel necessarily as comfortable, saying, hey, I just read this, or I think we need to be implementing this in a new way as a resident. And I think that, speaks to maybe the perceptions that I have going into this, but maybe you can speak to that as well.
So here's the dynamic in medicine that from my view is different than with everything else. We are used to buying the newest iPhone and downloading the newest app. That is the new normal, right? We all do those things, and we do it without thought. That's become rote. Medicine is very, very different, because when we do those things, if there isn't oversight, if there isn't a check, we are going to violate the first rule of medicine, which is do no harm. The stakes are much, much higher for us than they are for any other field. So just to kind of reference the podcast again, to reference Explore the Space, Christina Farr is the chief digital tech writer for CNBC. She's been on the show a couple times, and this is exactly what she and I kind of not disagree about, but this is the tension that comes up when she and I discuss the newest thing that Apple, Amazon, whomever, when they're entering the healthcare space, that we wrestle with is you can't be wrong with these things, because you could hurt somebody. And if you're wrong about an iPhone, someone wastes a couple $100.
Right.
If you're wrong about a new medication or something that someone's going to put in their body, or a device that we're going to use on another human being, you could harm them, irrevocably harm them. And that's where medicine does have to be, to circle back to the conversation that you had. We maybe do need to be a little bit more conservative. Now, does that excuse having substandard, technology when we're looking at electronic medical records? No, we could do it, but that could be better. We all recognize that, but we can't charge off without a firm basis of evidence and, studies that demonstrate evidence of efficacy over what we currently have before we can run into it, because we could hurt somebody. Right.
No, I mean, that's great. And I think that's a good point you're bringing up in terms of that battle. We can't be completely push, because we're going to be because we'll be in danger of harming others.
And not only that, there are parts of medicine, right? We can be as sophisticated and technology advanced as we want, there are parts of medicine that are fundamentally true. There is a sacred trust between a physician and their patient, and we have to respect that. And if we as a society of physicians and healthcare providers start to become cavalier with that dynamic and start to erode it by willy-nilly recommending things that don't have that firm basis in medicine, and we lose that trust, that bond that's lasted for so long breaks, we are not going to get it back. And that is something that we need to really nurture and ensure we maintain, if not strengthen, as we are moving through a world of such rapidly evolving technology where everything we touch is different 6 months later.
Yeah.
In medicine, there are some things that we do need to keep the same. And we need to make sure that trust is intact, that our patient knows when they're having a conversation with us, our primary objective is to get them well, or to get them to the shared objective that we come up with together.
Wow. Well, beautifully stated. What are some of the innovations that you're excited about to see in medicine?
The things that I'm excited about to see in medicine really are things that are around empowering people in medicine to get better and to do it in ways that are non-pejorative, non-judgmental. We have a long history in medicine, to my perception, that we are steeped in the most intensive education you can get from medical school and residency training and fellowship training. Every day you are exposed to really smart people. You become one of the really smart people. We are learning, we are teaching, we are engaging, we are challenging, and that is every day for year after year after year after year. You become an attending and it stops. You become an attending outside of academia, and you have to work really hard to maintain that sort of thing. And there is a really big voltage drop in the access to people that will help you get better. Not that we don't still have discussions around, there's this study or we're doing this thing at our hospital, but it's that concept of being coached. It becomes a negative. If you're needing coaching, you're doing something wrong. You're getting remediated. You are going in front of the chief of staff because something. As opposed to, we are constantly committed to getting better. We are sometimes held accountable for skills that we were never taught, most frequently around communication, team building, these sorts of things. How do we get better at those? That's the stuff that I'm excited about. That's the sort of work that I love doing. I love shadowing and coaching physicians. I love sitting down with groups and saying, okay, what kind of a culture do we want to have as a group? And how do we grow that, build it, implement it, mentor it, onboard it with new docs, recruit around it, all those things that you knew to have a high-performing organization. That sort of thinking is now normal. That sort of thinking is now expected because more and more people are being taught that. More and more people expect it. No one's going into a meeting and allowing themselves to be berated anymore. Those days are over, and rightly so. Now it's let's be more constructive. Let's engage, right? You're in your first year of residency. You are in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And you're going to be steeped with learning from the smartest people you could ever hope to be around for a while.
Yeah.
But then you have a responsibility to take that out and continue it in a way that feels engaging and rewarding for you, and also teach other people to do that. And we're getting better at that. There's more enthusiasm around it. There's time being carved out for it. That's the part that I'm the most excited about.
Amazing. And to talk about team building, and this is in reference to the culture conversation we've been having. There was a part about being the example, and also the piece about sharing your mistakes that I think is so important. Can you, and again, I know this is an uncomfortable topic, but could you bring up maybe a mistake in medicine that was really powerful for you?
That's a really good question. The mistakes in medicine that I've made in my career. So I've been a hospitalist in practice for almost 12 years. There's a lot. And that's one of the amazing things of medicine. It's a humbling profession. The things that stick out to me the most, quite honestly, are when I have said things to patients with the best of intentions and realized that I've hurt their feelings, or realized that I just missed the mark. One of them years ago, when I was earlier in my career, and this is actually what made me want to seek out one of my teammates to get some coaching, to realize, look, I feel like I'm good at my job, but I really want to be better. There was a patient that we were getting ready to discharge, and I met with the family. And instead of seeking out shared understanding around goals and getting a good sense of what their objectives were, not just for the hospital, but for their recovery, I started talking about the discharge plan and referenced that we were working on a skilled nursing facility. Mm-hmm. And they lost it. They were so angry with me. Dr. Shapiro, that is exactly what we don't want. We've done that before. It was so scary. We are never going. And I was mortified. I was so upset that I had, instead of checking to be sure that there wasn't some previous experience or some sensitivity around what to me was just, you go to the skilled nursing facility.
Right.
And I really upset them. And it was so difficult for me. And I apologized immediately and said, oh my gosh, look, I made a mistake, and let's fix this. Let's recycle. Let's have the case managers come in so we can go over all of our options and make sure we have a safe plan and do the things that I would have done normally. I'm going to call your primary care doctor and let them know what we're doing. And we got right back on track. But there was like 30 seconds there where I really just felt like I felt like I could have done a better job of communicating. Mm-hmm. That was really what it boiled down to. And I felt like I wanted to be good at it, and I felt like I was. And in that moment, I could have been better. And we have to be accountable to that. We have to recognize when those opportunities come up, we got to grab them. And so I went and called Steve Beeson and said, hey, can I come and chat with you? I'm a couple years out of residency, and I feel like clinically I'm okay. And my feedback is okay and this sort of thing. But I want to get better at just being a hospitalist. I want to get better at all the parts of being a doc. Mm-hmm. And finding that coach and accessing that was just one of the great things that happened to me in my career.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're, talking openly about having a coach. I think that's such an important piece, that you're working on yourself, and it really plays to, the topic we're talking about in terms of being the example. How do we instill kind of this openness in a culture to be vulnerable and talk about our errors and our mistakes?
I think it's just, first of all, it's giving people a frame of reference around a coach, around someone that's trying to help you get better. The vast majority of us have participated in a team sport, have had a coach at some point in our lives, someone who is there to guide us, mentor us, call us out when we make mistakes, push us as hard as, to get to where we need to go. We're used to that. Mm-hmm. We just get away from it, but it's not like it's not a muscle that's not there waiting to be used, or something that's a totally foreign concept. So I think it's, first of all, it's just providing that frame of reference. Like, this is work you've done before, either to be a coach or to be coached. That's the first thing. The second thing is to bring it up in a safe space where people realize we are doing this because we want to get better. We're not doing this because we're bad at our job. We're not doing it because we need to be remediated. We're not doing it because you're in trouble. Right. We're doing it because this is how we get better. And we know a couple things. When we get better, our patients do better. When we get better and have that feeling that we're getting better, we're going to enjoy our jobs and our careers more. It's going to impact positively all the things that we want to impact positively with respect to job satisfaction, reducing burnout, increasing engagement, improved physician retention, all of those sorts of things. And it's there for the taking, and we can all learn how to do it, and we can all participate in it. And then there's the last part of the practical side. We can do this in a way that is at minimum time neutral, if not a time saver. That when we get coached up, we get more efficient. When we get coached up, we get better at rounding. Yeah. When we get coached up, we get better and more efficient at getting our discharge process done. Right. So that's going to save us time.
Right.
It's difficult when you bring a new initiative forward to any organization, but physicians are very sensitive to this. This is more time for me, and I have no time. And that's fair. You got to be able to present this as, look, we're going to make this so it's at minimum time neutral. And as we do this work, it will become a massive time saver. Right. And it will. When we talk about coaching, whatever you're getting coached on, it will help you to save time because you're going to get better at it.
Right. And I'm a big fan of systems. Specifically, I think a big aspect when I was listening to the culture discussion was the self-reflection piece. Like, the most powerful part is self-reflecting. In your team, do you guys implement a system or have a space to self-reflect?
That's a really, really good question. The hospital medicine division that I'm the medical director for is a really new team. Okay. And we're only a couple of years old. We've grown really fast. We've doubled in size over a little over a year. We've brought lots of new doctors aboard, and it's been an amazing journey to watch. That's where we're really starting to focus. But interestingly, the first bookend when I came aboard in March of 16 was we sat down and we had very deliberate conversations about our team culture. And those are the words that we used. What do we want our team culture to look like? And we focused more on some specific things. We want to have a culture of no dumping. And as you know, but for your listeners, no dumping means if you have work, you do your own work. Right. You don't dump work off on somebody else. But you pair that with a culture of we're not going to let anybody drown. So if somebody needs help, if somebody has a couple of patients who are really sick and they just don't have the bandwidth to do an admission that morning, that they will feel comfortable and empowered to reach out to the rest of the crew to say, look, can someone help me out? And the rest of the crew knows the right answer is, yeah, I got you. Because the next time it's going to be you that needs help. We were very deliberate about that. We are getting to that point now of allowing our division meetings to have that space to do it. It's hard. It's really hard work. And we are just paddling out into those waters of allowing people to self-reflect. My job, I feel like as a leader in healthcare with respect to being a medical director is to allow people to do that right now in a more private setting. So when we do our one-to-ones, that's when we can talk about it. It's really difficult for anybody in any profession to be accountable in a room full of 30 people, some of whom they don't actually know very well. Right. But it's just starting that journey, and we are definitely just starting that journey, and it is hard. It's really hard work, but it's worth it. It's worth doing.
It's interesting. You mentioned the no dumping part, but also like helping your residents. I find that that's where the arguments on our team gets into is what we consider dumping versus like this was an impossible admission for me to grab given my time constraints. And that's that line where we draw that for myself versus another resident. That's the interesting part.
This is where you have to, as a team, say, okay, we are saying we want a culture where we don't dump work off on each other. Our tension point is around when I'm getting close to needing to go home. I know that with 80-hour work requirements, and there are very specific rules around that, and that's fine. So you have to manage to that. So you have to be very transparent with each other and say, let's not do this stuff in the moment. Let's decide it in advance. Right. If you need to be done with your work at time X, then as a team, let's just agree that at time X minus 60 minutes, you're done. And let's trial that for a month and see if that helps us. It's getting away from the ad hoc things, because you're right. That's when people will fight. That's when people will say, hey, you're taking advantage. Yeah. But I'm not taking advantage. Really, I've done 3 admissions and I saw 14 other patients, and I'm post call. The attending will be annoyed if I don't go home. Yeah. You got to sort that stuff out in advance, be transparent, write it down, agree to it. This is our guideline. This is our process, and stick to that process. Reevaluate that process. Guys, is this working for us? How did this work for you all? We're in our meeting. Is this working? Yes, no. I use SurveyMonkey we use all these different things to try to leverage people to speak up and then tweak it. But there needs to be a process to back up the ethos.
Mm-hmm. I love that. No, I think I'll definitely take that to my team. That's an amazing tip. So what do you think what's your take on what a fulfilled physician is, and do you feel like you're a fulfilled physician?
That's a great question, and it's a rapidly evolving question. I think the idea of a fulfilled physician today is probably different than it was a generation, 2-3 generations ago. You can look back, and I think a lot of physicians would say they didn't even think about what it meant to be fulfilled. We are one of those earlier generations that's starting to think about that stuff. Mm-hmm. I think that physicians specifically really wrestle with what it means to be fulfilled, because we talked a little bit earlier about the training and how immersive it is. And it's hard to embrace the whole self when you're going through that for so many years in a row. Mm-hmm. And to not have guidance, advice, a coach to help you. Okay, what does it feel like now to be fulfilled? For me, it was realizing, hey, I have time to start playing some tennis. I played tennis my whole life. I haven't played tennis for several years. I should start playing tennis again. And here we are 12 years later after finishing residency. I'm still playing a lot of tennis when I can. I think that it's something that you need to be deliberate about. You need to take time to think about what will make you feel fulfilled. and then make it a priority. And the work is going to be a big, big part of it. Being a doc is going to be a big, big part of it. But it really, in my opinion, should not be all of it. There needs to be other things that buttress that, where you can feel fulfilled, where you can be excited, that is not just around being a doc. And that doesn't mean being a doc isn't wonderful. I wouldn't give it up for anything. I love it. But I think one of the reasons that I love it is because I have other things that just sort of stoke that fire of being enthusiastic about life, about activities, about challenge, about being out of the comfort zone, so that I can do it when I'm practicing medicine as well. So for me, do I feel like I'm fulfilled? Do I feel excited? Yeah, I love what I'm doing. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Some of these journeys, being a medical director is hard. Being, part of a growing healthcare community is hard. Leaving San Diego and coming back up to Northern California was really hard. I'm a new dad. Being a dad is really hard, but there you go. Clap it up all around. I need all the support I can get.
You got this. Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's hard, but I wouldn't trade any of these things for anything. Being a podcast host, trying to find the time to do that, and editing podcasts late at night because that's the only time I can carve out.
Right.
It's hard, but all worth it, and they're all connected. They're all part of this life, and they're all part of the things that, I don't know, I guess kind of define me and that make me feel good and make me feel like I can be the best possible doc, the best possible husband, the best possible dad, friend, all tennis player, you name it. So I do feel that way, but it's not static. It's not like, okay, box checked, I'm good for 2018. No, I mean, you gotta feed it. You gotta think it through. You get an email from Dr. Brana saying, come on the podcast and talk. You say, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Because it's fun. This is the sort of stuff that just keeps it moving. It's different for everybody, but it's important to be mindful around it and to really stoke and develop it.
Amazing. I love it. And just to add on something, first off, I totally agree. The things outside of medicine get you excited, give you energy, and come back to work and you enjoy it. I also say, because we have so much time at work, I think the big thing for me was trying to pay attention to each patient encounter and the way I might have been able to give just a little bit of insight to help them in some way, even if it's small. But just to know that I had that personal impact that really gives me some joy at work as well. But I'm totally with you. It's
a tiny bit of perspective. You use the word small around sharing maybe a little bit of yourself with a patient or engaging with them around something besides what's the antibiotic that we're selecting for your community-acquired pneumonia.
Sure.
For you, it might have been small. That's what they're going to remember when they go home. Yeah. They're going to remember that you walked in the room and Wimbledon was on and you started talking with them about like Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's going to be sticky. It's not that you walked in and said, I'm going to use ceftriaxone and azithromycin for community. It's that you walked in and you recognized that this is another human being with thoughts, feelings, and emotions who happened to have the television on, and it was Wimbledon. Yeah. And you guys spent 10 minutes chatting about the tennis or the book that's sitting on their bedside table, or hey, you've just had you fractured your hip. What are you really excited to get back to? Oh, my wife and I were going to go on this big tour. Oh, cool. We like to tour too. For us, it may feel small. That's the stuff that's sticky. That's the stuff that they will remember. Oh, I had this really cool doc named Dr. Brana, and he didn't just care about me getting better, but he cared about me as a person.
Yeah. And I love that, because actually it comes back to the point of your podcast, which is bridging the gap between the physician and the community, and just being that human that really fills the gap, because we're humans before being doctors, right?
That's absolutely right.
I love this. So thank you so much for your time, Dr. Mark Shapiro. It's been absolutely amazing. I'm sure listeners are going to get a lot out of this. Can you let our listeners know how to reach you?
Absolutely. So the show is Explore the Space. It's on all of the usual platforms for downloading podcasts. The website is www.explorethespaceshow.com. I'm on email at mark@, at explorethespaceshow.com. Twitter is @ETS Facebook is @ExploreTheSpaceShow. I'm there. I'm accessible. I love to talk about these sorts of things. I love feedback on the show. Some people really, really like it. Some people have pushed back on some of the content, which is totally fine. Again, most of the feedback that I get is really, really positive, but we're all learning in this space. And so, I love to have, if people have ideas about stuff they'd like to have on the show or people that they'd want to have come back, I love that sort of thing. So happy to engage with people who listen to the show. And it's a journey, and I'm sticking with it because it's a lot of fun. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk with you about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. It's always extremely precious, and I'm so thankful that you used your time to be with me today. And I'm going to put on all those links on our show notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Mark Shapiro.
Thank you, Taylor.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Happy Doc podcast, the voice of fulfilled physicians. If you enjoyed the episode, please drop us a like, comment, and share. Share us through the social media channels we have on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The handle is @HappyDocPodcast. That's @HappyDocPodcast. You can find our website at www.thehappydoc.com. Again, thank you so much for listening to the Happy Doc, the voice of fulfilled physicians.